There we go. Something green came on, so must have done it right. All right, let's pray together. Oh God, we thank you for this day. And as we look at the water in the fields, we are especially grateful and thankful to you for watching over us and taking care of us. Thank you for that rain, and we pray that you'll send us some more. And God, I thank you for this commission. I thank you for their commitment to their community. I ask you to guide them, lead them today and every day, so that all that they do will be pleasing in your sight and will benefit the citizens here in Hutchinson. I ask you now to bless this time as we pray in your holy name. Amen.
The jacket. Well, welcome. Appreciate you all being here today. Nice crowd. We'll probably move to public comment. If you're here for public comment, you're welcome to get up. Maybe 5 minutes. And one thing we're going to probably between now and until we get into solar, we're going to probably qualify public comment not to contain anything about solar, if you would not mind doing that. But is there anyone here for public comment? We got to worry about it. All right. Any additions or revisions to the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to move 6B from the consent agenda to regular business. And I would also like to discuss for about 5 minutes. I don't think it'll take more than 5 minutes. I've just got a question about what's the climate thing that 980 or that 790 page document that we got. You emailed it to us with all the water stuff and.
Oh, is that, are you talking about for emergency management?
Yeah, I think so. It was like 790 pages or something. Yeah. So I'd just like to discuss that. Like I said, it won't take but a few minutes. I've just got a question and I kind of wanted to see where the rest of the commission was on it.
So 6B down to 7D. You said B?
Yeah, 6B.
Okay. And we'll create a 7E for, we'll say what it is when we get there, I guess, that document.
The emergency management document. I forgot the title of it. I can have that. You want me to have Adam here?
It won't be. I mean,
yeah, I'd prefer him to be here if he could. That would
Okay.
be good for comments. That would be good. Okay. Having moved that, did that, consent agenda, any further questions? Got a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'd moved it as not presented, but amended.
As amended, yes.
I will second.
And seconded by Commissioner Wines. Any other comments, questions?
I'm okay with adding. I'm okay with adding discussion on the emergency management, but I see no reason to do 6D.
6B.
D.
You say B or D on that? You say
B.
B.
Oh, you say
B.
B? I thought you said D.
Now B.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Any further question? Not? Roll call.
Commissioner Hurst,
No.
Wait, what?
Moving
Yeah,
replacement
I just-
appointment, Health Department Advisory Board member.
The motion on the floor is to approve the consent agenda.
yeah,
Per-
yes.
And we moved that down for discussion, so with that revision, moving 6B off of there.
Well, just a point of order, maybe. The Commissioner Hurst, are you objecting to the agenda change?
I just question the reason to move 6B, replacement appointment to the Reno County Health Department Advisory Board, because that's something that's usually the same comment made, and so I just didn't see any.
Well, I think for, unless there's, since there's a dissent, don't we require an agenda change to be voted on?
Sure.
Yes.
Do we?
Well, I think my parliamentary research is that a consent agenda, if one of the members asks for something to be removed from consent, it can be removed. That's the best research I've been able to do on this. A motion to amend the agenda usually involves adding something or subtracting something from it, which is slightly different.
Yes, I think technically, adding 7E would need to be voted on.
It looks like
I
an
would agree with that, unless it's
amendment
just
to
done by
the
consent.
agenda.
What's that?
It looks like an amendment to the agenda.
It's not really, so I hate being bogged down in these technical things, but it's on the agenda as a consent, so it's there. So it's not, you're not adding or subtracting from the agenda, which I think, in my opinion, does take a vote to add something or subtract something from it. But you're just but when a board member asks to move it from consent to business, the rules that we have in place say that they can do that.
Well, that's what we did before. That's the reason I can say.
I don't think that's in the rules.
It's in the, it's in the parliamentary rules that we're trying to, it's not in the, you're right, I don't think it's in the specific rules we adopted, but we do reference rules of order.
You're saying it's a Roberts rule?
I think it's a Roberts rule that says if, and I went into the weeds on this one time when we first started talking about this stuff. And it did say if it's on consent, but a member wants it to be placed to business, it's kind of like a veto power that any member can do it without a full vote, just going from consent to business. Theoretically, then, if you really want to get technical, as soon as you open it for business, you could do a motion to close discussion and vote on it really quickly too. But it all gets very parliamentary.
Yeah, because consent agenda should be unanimous consent, so it should receive a 5-0 vote.
That's the theory of a consent agenda. Ironically, the theory of consent agenda is to speed the meeting along. So I said theory, not always the practice. But the idea is these are things that will be unanimously approved, so we have them on the agenda. Everyone's had a chance to look at them. They're named, and they can just quickly move through. If it gets placed to business, then you get into all the other, whether it's, you can also, when you get to business, you can just do a motion to call the question and move past it quickly that way.
So what's the ruling?
I was gonna move it.
Okay,
We're gonna vote on it.
all right.
In all likelihood, it's gonna go through. So there was a motion to accept the consent agenda with 6B removed with the revision and seconded. Any further comment? Not roll call.
Didn't you wanted to add discussion items? Did you do that already?
I think we can do that after the current motion.
Let's get through the consent. Yep, go ahead, roll call.
Commissioner Hurst,
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Weitzel,
Yes.
Commissioner Bogner?
Yes. All right. We need a motion to put that on, that's 6E.
So the chair makes the agenda, and then if a member wants to add or subtract something from the agenda, they make a motion to amend the agenda, which I think is what would be appropriate
John.
next.
Yep.
So I motion to add 7E as we discussed earlier to discuss the thing.
Emergency management document. Okay. Do I hear a second?
Yeah, I'll second, because if we don't talk about it, it's not gonna be voted on. So we have to, since we pulled it from consent, we need to.
No, this is something different. This is the
emergency management
Oh.
document.
I've just got
Sorry.
a quick question for the board.
Sure,
is all.
second.
Seconded by Commissioner Friesen. Any other comments? Not, roll call?
Commissioner Hurst?
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen?
Yes.
Commissioner Parks?
Yes.
Commissioner Weitzel?
Yes.
Commissioner Bogner?
Yes. All right, motion passes 5-0. We'll move to business item. 7A, resolution for countywide residential housing growth and discussion of request from City of Hutchinson. And we'll lay this one in somebody else's lap.
So, Commissioner, we have this on the agenda. There's 2 items up for discussion and possible approval. And the first one is Patrick and I had worked on creating a policy that helps the county provide grants to cities in Reno County to create housing, to help kind of spark the growth of housing that has not been taking place in Reno County and Hutchinson for many years. To kind of, I was looking at population projections as we were had been talking about this, and from the Center for Economic Development and Business Research from Wichita State University, it has Reno County in the negatives, and population forecast for Reno County from 2014 through 2064 going from 63,794 people to 48,882. So as you see, the county is on a downward trend in population. Our businesses in town have openings. We have hopefully business growth, but our population's going downward. And part of that is housing, because we are losing housing. We're having more demolitions in some parts of the county than we are building houses. So this idea is it's an economic development project or proposal to use the economic development funds that Reno County has in the annual budget. We budget $400,000 annually, usually spend about $25,000 to $50,000 on job incentives, and we currently have an agreement with Superior Holdings to pay them some money in 2024 and probably future years. So that total $400,000 not completely available for this. We have a little over $1 million in reserves for economic development projects that also could be used for these types of issues. Housing is very important. So let me go to the attached resolution, basically creates this policy, or creates to where Reno County can do this. And then there would be an attachment for a development agreement. That's the next pages that kind of spell out what would qualify. And we have things that would qualify for the housing for the funds would be engineering and site development planning, site acquisition costs, site preparation, sanitary and storm sewers and lift stations, drainage conduits, channels, levees, street grading, paving, curbs and gutters, street lighting, underground public and limited private utilities, sidewalks and water mains and extensions. So this is kind of a grant that would help cities. The one that's on the agenda today is the city of Hutchinson, but it would help all cities in Reno County if they applied to kind of spark the growth of residential development. So wanted to see if you had any questions on the policy. And then as we start talking about the development agreement and the city of Hutchinson's request, Enrico, the city manager, is here to kind of talk about their request. But the first step would be to see if you guys wanted to adopt a policy.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Weitzel.
I'm all for building houses. We do have housing needs here in Reno County, but I've also always had an issue with government competing directly with private industry. It seems to me that if this was a good place to build houses and put money into housing, then we could attract builders to do it without giving direct money to do this, which is going to be around $9,000 to $10,000 per homes to build these additional units. In addition, they're probably going to get other incentives such as tax abatements and IRBs, and so I just don't see a good return on investment for doing this. Providing this kind of money in addition to other tax incentives. I think we should leave this to the private industry to build the homes where the people want to build the homes. Reno County did, from the 2010 to the 2020 census, lose about 10% of the, we went from about 27,000 households to about 25,000 households. So we lost about 10% of households. We didn't lose that many homes, so I'm not sure where exactly we lost that many households from, but it's not all housing. And then the other thing that's odd is that, housing seems to always be full. There's not a whole lot of homes on the market. So I think we really need to look at the root problem of why we aren't able to find people to build these homes. Is it regulation? Is it because our taxes are too high? We need to figure out why. These homes are south of 17th Avenue, and you're looking at $250,000, $300,000 homes. You're going to need to make around $100,000 a year in order to qualify for these homes. Are families that make that kind of money going to want to live in that area? Yes, sir.
Just a quick point here. You're talking about two different issues here. I think really what you're talking about now, and that comes in the next.
Well, that was the end of my statement. So.
Okay, well, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
But Commissioner, yes, the first one is the policy, whether Reno County wants to have a policy, and then we'll get into the city of Hutchinson's request, and Enrico can answer some of those questions.
Okay, perfect. So that's all I had.
Commissioner Hurst?
Yeah, used to be the old adage years ago was smokestacks bring chimneys. That's no longer in place anymore. Yes, it's part of it, but it doesn't ring the same bell that it did with today's society as it did back 30, 40 years ago or longer. What we're doing now hasn't been working very well. So in my opinion, we need to look at opportunities and to try some things new. And I don't think that this is competing necessarily with private industry, because these homes are going to be sold to individuals, whether they move within the city or whether they move within the county or whether they move within the state or whether they move out of state into state. I think we have to try some different things and use that economic development tool as housing, and to supplement what the chamber and the industry is trying to bring jobs in here, because I think the jobs and the housing kind of go together. And it's unfortunate, yes, there are not too many homes on the market today, but the ones that are on the market, many times those homes don't quite fit the mold of younger people that might be moving back here. I wish it did, but it doesn't. It seems like they want a little better item than what you and I live in, and that's just a matter of it. And so I think that if we can look at, and maybe we can find out what the return on investment may be here pretty soon, and we can ask that question when it comes to the money part of it. But I think this is something we need to put in place right now to get us thinking along a different line, this policy.
And kind of one other thing that I forgot to bring up earlier, but so the Woody Seat Freeway came up earlier, and then there's a road owned by the city and a township near a school that has come up earlier in the past, and these are building roads within the city or repairing roads within the city. Within the county, but it wasn't appropriate for us to spend county money at those times. I understand this is new development, but is county money really appropriate to be building city infrastructure? Was my other thought on the matter.
Anyone else? I do have a question though, and this comes back to our mayor meeting that we had here a while back, and the input that they'd given to us. Did we reach out to see how they feel about us doing this and incentivizing them with some help of some infrastructure work?
The only city I reached out to was South Hutchinson, other than Hutchinson, South Hutchinson, and the city administrator there was on board with this. Thought it was a great idea. I didn't reach out to the other mayors.
I know in the conversation they had in that meeting, we didn't necessarily have minutes or anything, but the conversation went to the effect of that they were looking for some help to incentivize people to come there. A couple of small communities are seeing growth, and so I don't know if this would be a help or not, but I think it would work right along with that for sure. You had your light on, Commissioner Bowden?
I did stop by the local city there, and they've got a very similar project that's been in place for 2 years now. They're starting to move dirt and starting to build infrastructure. I drove by, that's why I stopped by. I knew this was coming up. And I saw them moving some dirt, and that's been 2 years in the process. This isn't going to be a fast turnaround if we should decide to do something here. And a lot of my constituents are saying, what are you guys thinking here? That's, that's my tax dollars you're taking from me and putting it somewhere else. I like the idea that it's open to all cities. But when you're talking about what we're talking about, you're talking about spending a heck of a lot of money. And you're not going to be able to help very many projects. I would rather see it incentivized other ways. It's kind of the thought process I've arrived at. And yes, all indications are we need to do something. It appears like the program is going to work. They were having trouble getting money in the form of grants. They used their ARPA money to spark their deal in their town. But I'm kind of hard pressed to tax all the people for a few spots. But then again, this is a broad deal that allows it. On the other side, once it's allowed, then we've got to make some hard decisions of who gets money, how much money they get. And with $400,000 a year and hard telling what, who, and what, and the scope of it, the money we might be able to afford any single development might not be of much consequence. I'm torn between what we ought to do, and that's my statement. I do know there's a similar project that they feel very good about. They did say they have a lot of people asking for the housing, what lots cost. So it appears to be a workable deal. I'm not saying that. I just don't know if it's our place to do it on a county basis, or whether it should be with the local governments themselves, the local cities. But I'm willing to listen.
Commissioners, I just, and it will be brought up a little bit later with the Hutchinson example proposal, but for any housing development that takes place, whether it's one house or 30 houses or in between, the return will be that there's going to be more on the property tax base, which helps everybody. As you grow the property tax base, that means the tax rate can decrease. Obviously, people's valuations go up, so, whether it's decrease or not, we can argue that, but the tax base, as it grows, makes it more affordable for everyone else with the services that we are mandated to provide. So this is an attempt to help grow that tax base and to help business growth also, as residential and business growth kind of go hand in hand.
And this first part of it's not necessarily land acquisition more than infrastructure help, correct? Just so we're clear on
It can kind of be either,
two
but
different-
I think
that. Two different motions we're talking about here.
In creating this policy, we've got, there's broadly, what I did was I took, I think there's an moderate income housing guidelines from the state of Kansas, had a list of things that that program, which is a state program, funds, and I figured, my logic was the state knows how, this program is working, so we'll just copycat that to start with. So that's where that list of proposed uses comes from. I don't believe we have on there site acquisition cost is on there. So that's, so it would be that and all these other things. Because we have Hutchison coming first, but we don't really know if this is successful and moves forward, what Haven or Bueller or somebody else might want. So we wanted to have the flexibility to kind of tailor it to each applicant if it goes forward.
Well, I know the thought was a lot of the infrastructure and specials on stuff makes it almost cost prohibitive in some cases to develop, so. Commissioner Hurst.
Yeah, I just recently talked to a fellow that just built a new house next to Reno County. And his specials on that house were about $15,000 special, put over 20 years. And I know in one development there in South Hutch, it's right at 20 or 22,000 specials to do everything. And so if you can take that off the P&I that the homeowner has to pay, or somewhere on that. In fact, regarding numbers and just taking Hutchinson's, if I can get a little lateral to talk about that, and is depending upon which how many houses are built on this property, it's between right at $8,700 to just under $11,000, depending upon whether they do 24 or 33 houses. And in my estimation, when we do this, it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, we'll allow each community, if we want to build houses, so many dollars based upon that original guideline here. And so it makes it even Steven for everyone, whether you live in Bueller or Haven or Turon or wherever else. Now, I know Turon's done a lot of demolitions out in Turon, and they've got more to go and like some help with that, but there's not available. But, those can be demolished, and that could be a pretty good deal because you've already got water and sewer. The cost is a lot less. But when you look at development, too, you've got a group of houses there that will feed off of everyone else, so that you have good comps after you get the first one started. Just looking at it from a real estate standpoint, and I don't think I'm wrong with regard to that. So I think this just gives, this here just is a first step in looking at the resolution of the policy to give us the opportunity to do that, and we can move forward on the rest. That's my thoughts.
Commissioner Friesen?
Thank you. Sometimes I'm a little slow on the uptake on what we're doing, so I like to reiterate a little bit. But it looks like if I'm kind of reading between the lines, and maybe you said this, the policy kind of came out of this idea that the city of Hutch brought us, right? Like, this is the first use of the policy, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, I have complained before that we don't use our economic development funds. We just don't use them some years, and they just kind of, we allocate them and they're there for something. I think it's been very clear. I forget the committee that did a lot of work to study kind of the priorities. It was kind of COVID era ARPA funding, like how should we spend the money? And it was, there were three things, but I remember two, and probably the top two were childcare and housing. Economic development. So this is kind of fits all three. So I think we've been given guidance through a pretty extensive county-wide review of a very wide representation of people on what we should be doing to help develop the county. And so, and we've already allocated money to do economic development. This falls well within that. And so creating a policy that accesses those funds and actually utilizes them, given we've already allocated it, makes a lot of sense to me. So, I, could go on record. I really appreciate, because we had a couple conversations, about these topics in executive session, so we can't speak to that. But now that it's a public item, I would go on record, like the city's proposal. I think I appreciate, because they're just doing something. I don't necessarily, and I think the amount is has limited risk for us. So, I would prefer efforts where we engage developers and ask for all of their proposals versus kind of picking a spot and then assuming we've picked the right spot. But I've given that feedback directly to city council members, and I'm not going to vote against their proposal, because I think the important thing is they've started the process and they're kind of priming the pump, and they get a little bit of the advantage of, like, hey, they were the first mover, they helped us create this policy. So I'm going to go vote yes for that and for this policy for those reasons. But I would like the county and the city to work together on, maybe like a quarterly RFQ or RFP process, where it's not RFP process, where we say, hey, developers, we have this money. You are the smart people that know how to get this done. Tell us why you haven't built homes in Reno County. And there has to be a part of it that's economic based. They just don't, there's some gap between a good business case and where they're at today. So hopefully money can help plug the hole. But that would be my one request, is staff between the city and county ask for the industry to say how they can use this funding and put it, whatever it is, quarters or something, to where you have competitive efforts, so you don't have one person sliding it in here and then it looks like they've got an advantage. Putting a little bit of competition in the process, I think, creates a more efficient use of our money and kind of keeps everybody honest. So I think this is a good step. The idea of let's do something, because we haven't done anything, is why I'm voting yes on both of these, and appreciate the staff consider the request on the RFP.
Commissioner Wisely, you push.
Yeah, and I think if they did something like that, I think I would be totally in support that, engaging the private industry. And I will remind the commission too that this is not a sure thing. I was on the Haven School Board when we sold some land, and and they were looking at developing, I think, 40 homes, something like that. And Commissioner Bogner, that's in your district, and 40 homes didn't get built. So we could spend $260-some thousand and end up with 3 homes. I mean, this is not a sure thing. This is a risk, and so yeah, they're hoping to build 27 plus homes, but it may not happen if people don't want to move there and spend $300,000 on a house in that area of town.
That's what I was referencing to there. It's been a long, slow drag, but they are building infrastructure. You'll see a lot happening in the next, because I was curious like you. It's sat there and knowing we have to vote on this today, I just wanted to kind of gauge what's happened in that similar project, and the people I talked to seem to be very encouraged. They're to a point where they're ready to put the infrastructure in. So there's been some things going on. It's just been a long haul. And to your point, we're talking about the same property.
Commissioner Hurst, did you?
Slam home can be built for at least for $150 a square foot or under, and have decent done. Now, that's cost, okay? And I might say one thing that was mentioned before is what's slowing down Hutchinson's building. I went to a contractor one time on a project, and he wanted to know where it was going to be built at. I told him South Hutchinson or Haven or Yoder or somewhere else besides Hutchinson, and he said, good. I'm not going to name that person because he probably still builds, but it was primarily because of the cost of inspections, the cost of permits, and the way that the inspectors handled the project and the contractor. And I think that's being worked on. If it isn't, Enrique, you need to, and talk, don't just take my word for it, talk to other contractors, okay? But I know I've heard that from several, that it's so much easier to get along and to build in South Hutch than it is Hutch. And so that's just one of those things that if you want to know it straight out, that's something that needs to be looked at anyway, and still come within the in codes.
Commissioner Friesen, you had your button.
Yep. So just to keep things moving, I'd motion to approve the policy recommendation as presented and direct staff to further develop some sort of methodology to intake proposals on some routine basis.
I'll second that. And got a resolution number, you
Is
said?
that what you're referring to this resolution?
Yeah, the 2024-21
And I'll,
page. I think it's page 3 of the attachment. Is that right?
Yeah, because you got them on the first 2 pages
and I might qualify my second there. I've been contacted by multiple people about not spending tax dollars for development. And then supposedly I ran my campaign against that. I did not run my campaign against it. I want to make this comment. I made the comment, and I think it makes some logical sense, that who in the world would watch a decline in their investments over 40 years and continue to let that decline and not pull their money out and try to do something else with it? We've thrown money at doing this kind of stuff over the years, and nothing's worked so far. if a new fresh idea comes along that might help, I kind of got to support that and stand behind that. I'm with the other comments maybe that Daniel made on this as well, that we have the economic development funds laying here. Year over year, they're not being spent, and they need to go somewhere, or we need to stop taking them out of the taxes, one or the other. And if it's there and it needs spent and this can spark something that'll happen, I think we got to look at it pretty seriously. And I realize it's not an overnight return, but if we could build that many units, that would be a pretty good return on investment, I really believe. But I've been dying to make that comment for some time, because I never said I wouldn't fund these things. I said we would look at them, and if it don't work, if you'll remember the Superior Holdings deal, my comment in that meeting, if it don't work, we pull this. We do something different until it does work. We want to use the funds appropriately that make an investment that is a return for the people of Reno County. I'd love to see us grow and defer their taxes. That's about the biggest issue, state and local, is to get the taxes down. Well, we've got to do it somehow. There's not enough people now to keep them where they need to be. So I'm just qualifying my second on that, why I'm in support of this.
I might mention that Stafford has a program in Stafford County, and they've built 10 houses and have 2 more in process.
Anyway, motion and a second. Any further comment? Not, roll call.
Commissioner Hurst,
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Weitzel,
No.
Commissioner Bogner.
No.
No.
Motion passes 3-2. Second half. Enrique, you want to come up and talk?
Good morning, Commissioners. And
Dare you come up and talk, should I say? Go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. Enrico Villegas, City Manager for the City of Hutchinson. I definitely appreciate a lot of the discussion that you had, and a lot of my talking points were used, so that's great. But I do want to reiterate a lot of the important points here. That with the ARPA task force, some context there, that the 3 pillars that were picked were housing, workforce development, and childcare. And so this already fits into one of that key pillar points that were identified from that task force. In addition to that, we did do a housing survey, and the housing survey was countywide and was looking at what does the city or the county need in order to fix things. And so some preliminary data from that, from the consultant that led the survey for us, that we need more entry-level 3-bed, 2-bath housing units. That's a shortage that we have. And so this is a proposal to bring forth to fill that need, to fill that gap that we have in the county. And so it is important to note that our governments are symbiotic. Hutchinson is in Reno County. We share the same tax base. And so we need each other to succeed. So if Hutch wins, the county wins. If the county wins, Hutch wins. We all need each other in this effort to solve these problems. And so a proposal like this should give the voters confidence in their local governments that we're joining forces to solve this housing crisis that we have. And so the city's proposal is not to conflict with private enterprise. It's the opposite. We are trying to attract private enterprise here because something's wrong. I think we can all look at that, or at a minimum, we're stuck. And so if we can say, we'll just do this one time and perhaps the market fixes itself, that's a win. Or if we need to do this maybe 2 or 3 times, and then eventually we've jump-started the economy enough that builders and developers just kind of run from there, that's great. The tax base grows, again, it's kind of a mutual win for all of us. And so that's really the hope here. So some facts that were shared, and Randy shared, that if we don't do anything, we have a declining population. If we know that that's in the forecast, we ought to get out in front of that. And so for us as a city, we're averaging -11 housing units a year, -11. And so what's baked into that is the amount of new builds that we have can't compete with the amount of demos, foreclosures, or housing units that are otherwise legally withheld from people living in there because maybe they're uninhabitable or something like that. And so for all of the category of housing to where people can't get in it versus the new builds is where you get the -11. And so we're stuck. And I have heard, because I tried to talk to many developers and builders, just why is there no growth here? And there has been misconception that the city is hard to work with. And I'm not going to shy away from that, and that's things that we're trying to work on. And if that's the truth, then a proposal like this ought to send a message that we're open for business, that we want to grow, we want to develop, and we have plans in place, that pre-approved design plans that we plan to share with the builders, that we've already reviewed these as a city and approved them. So if you pick these, we can move right along. But the other aspect of this, we're going to put out an RFP to say, how can we best utilize this land? What's the best design that we can put in place for this? So there's still creativity from private market that we need. We need their expertise. We need their help. But we needed to have a product to give them. And so the product is the land. So otherwise, the RFP on its own would just say, hey, we're interested in growth. But this is at least saying we're really interested in growth. Here's the land, and here's other things how we can help you. And so anyway, I wanted to share that context with you all, and I'll certainly stand for any questions. But one of the other facts that I wanted to share with you, that if we develop the 33 homes like we anticipate to do, the market rate in that area where we're proposing to do this is anywhere from about $220,000 to $270,000. And so when you look at the new builds, which we'd be putting in, it's a little bit of apples and oranges from new development to some existing development, but generally speaking, about 220 to 270 is fair for that area. And so if we account for the fact that if we just sell the homes at $225,000, or the developer sells the homes at $225,000, and if we assume that the value of the home will not go up, and if we assume that the mill levy will not go up, the county should expect to see on a return on their investment in 10 years, even making all those other assumptions, that everything else being equal, you'd still get a return back in 10 years for this. Again, it's a win for everyone. So with that, I'll stand for any questions that you may have.
Commissioner Friesen, your light came on.
Yep.
I know you.
Enrico, thanks for being here again. Appreciate it. And again, appreciate the city's forward thinking here and kind of effort to get some momentum going in the right direction. As you noted, it seems like we have momentum in the wrong direction for housing. So I think I think we all had kind of comments that were interwoven in the first half of our decision making that was related to this, so we might have to reiterate them again here. But I noted my one worry that we're going to make decisions that the private sector partners that we need here may think differently about. And so, again, I think somebody that comes to us with a good idea that wasn't ours and is kind of taking a little risk deserves to, have some latitude. So I'm not necessarily going to ask for direction on this from our side, but the idea of, it seems like you're really confident on the location. That does seem to be the hardest thing to pick and the hardest thing to change. So hopefully we've got that decision right. I'll trust you guys on that. Beyond that, my opinion that I would love for you guys to consider is the rest of our investment, which is roughly $250,000. I would really hope that the process is done, you get the input necessary from whoever your private partner is, that money is spent in conjunction with the partner. And then to Commissioner Weitzel's point, we ought to ensure this investment produces, and so we don't want a haven situation. We want some commitment. Like if we're going to put in 250 on our side, commit to at least a phased approach. Commit to, I don't know, it's not, they're going to build half of these homes for sure. Some sort of commitment, some sort of metric to where we can measure their success, because it does feel, and I know this isn't like your full plan, this is one page of it, but it does feel like we have some risk here if we don't have a commitment. So that's what I would ask, is like get somebody engaged via a competitive process, make them commit, including committing their own capital to this. And then my final point, kind of a last question for you, is what do you see the city's, the one thing I'm missing here is what the city's investment is on your side. So I think there was like 10 questions in there, but
No, that's okay.
thank you.
So I'll answer the last question first. So the city's investment, we've purchased the land to develop additional investment that we're going to be serving as the project manager for this entire project. So we're going to put the RFP out, and we're basically going to be managing it very similar to a public project like we would a road or a water line or anything like that. We're going to be very intimately involved in this process. Potentially other investment down the line if needed. But up front, all of the project administration is going to be very time consuming for us. And so that's a burden that you as a county won't have to bear. And so with the element of risk, any development is always going to carry some form of risk. And so this being infill is going to be particularly challenging. But part of the incentives that we already have just as a city, not because of this project, but we are highlighting this with this project. Water and sewer fees to tap our mains would be waived. Building permits and other things would be waived to a certain amount. And part of that, the waiver, is infill is preferred because all the infrastructure is already built out, the roads, utilities, so it should theoretically be cheaper versus if we had to annex land and then extend a water main and things like that. That's where cost really ratchets up. And so infill development in this area was seen as fairly low risk. There is room to build. The property owner that we actually bought this from, it was their intention to build this or build it out into housing, but for whatever reason they just didn't. And so it was going to be built one way or another. And so hopefully I kind of addressed some of your questions, Commissioner.
Thanks. I'm trusting on the government's going to project manage this, because I just as a private, owning a private company, it scares me a little if I was gonna private industry has a lot of great ideas and they come in and it's like, hey, the government's here to help you. I know this is a local effort and you're new and you've already indicated you recognize there are barriers and you're breaking those down. So I'm putting a lot of trust that the government is going to be a really good partner here that accelerates efforts, not slows them down. So thank you.
When I was with the city of South Hutchinson, when we had to run a sewer line and water lines out to a new development business, looked at an ROI of 10 years. That's 10% back on your money. I realized it may this be phase one would be half of it, and phase two is the other half. But when it's done, if we get 10% back, I think that's a good investment. I really do.
Anybody else? Commissioner Bowden.
Enrico, how is it that the property has gone overlooked this long? You're confident the property is buildable. There's nothing, pipelines, what have you.
We're doing, I don't know why it's sat, but we're doing an environmental assessment in addition to survey work. So we've made the offer and there's a process that we're going through. So if there is anything funny that we uncover, potentially we just walk away and then we just look at another site. So nothing is stuck right now in that aspect. But I have no idea why it has sat. But I am confident in this. I've spoken to 2 neutral site developers that do this type of work for a living. And I just say, hey, can you look at this, with a fresh set of eyes? You're the expert here. What do you think? I'm like, oh, that's prime. There's good housing near there, park nearby, good school district. So that's a very good developable lot. And that was from 2 separate neutral parties. So,
Thank you. Commissioner Watson?
Okay, so your 10-year estimate, that's after all the houses are built and all the tax, because that's south of 17, so there's some tax abatements and stuff that we offer, aren't there?
the NRP wouldn't be part of this, so, but after all of the housing is built, after 10 years, you should see your investment back.
Okay.
Give the NRP tax incentive for this.
Okay, so we'd be charging full sales tax from
What's
the
the
beginning.
estimated tax off of a building like that? Did you guys put that figure together? So what would be the estimated tax off a unit? $250,000.
Every 30,000 is about $50 a month, so 250,000 would be $400 a month. It's about 5,000 a year.
I was a little light on that, but yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that concerns me is just location. South of 17th, there's a real income disparity between south of 17th and north of 17th. The average income 4 years ago, and I'm sure it's moved up a little bit, was about $29,000 per family for the 102nd Congressional District, which is where this is located. And we're going to need people to make 3 times the average for that area in order to be able to move in and buy these homes. Are we confident we can attract people that make that much more than what the average income is for that district?
I believe so. And speaking with a lot of larger business owners and employers in the city, one of the things that they just have constantly mentioned, again, going back to housing, my employees have nowhere to live. And so they either live in Mac, Newton, Wichita, and then commute. So if we can provide options, this would be great for teachers, nurses, police officers, firefighters. This is good entry-level homes for that market. And so, anyway.
Is there a chance, I'm speaking out of the side of my mouth here, is there a chance that the hospital has a partnership idea with this?
We've been exploring that.
That's what I wondered, because they're exploring that. I just wondered if there'd be a chance they could partner in this too,
Yeah.
or something.
We're exploring all options to make sure that this is successful.
I didn't want to put you on the spot. I just
Yeah,
I needed to
but we have been exploring that in addition to working with other community partners, because we all want this to be a success. Again, every development is going to carry its own set of risks, but I'm confident that as we push forward and we're all lockstep together, that we can get this off the ground. So.
Enrico, sorry.
Yeah.
This is the kind of question that I think as we kind of build a template for these, I'll be asking developers well before an agenda meeting, so I apologize.
No.
But when I was kind of contemplating how a development agreement would work, I was thinking the county would at least have the amount and then some sort of project deadline to review it. And I don't know if do you know what would be a reasonable project deadline for this to kind of, for the county to say, we're going to expend funds until this date, and then we need to either find out if it happened or it didn't happen or review it. So do you have a timeline like that for us?
That's something that we would put in an RFP to kind of field back those questions. So as we put that out, what is a reasonable timeline for this? Because with the package that we plan to put in the RFP of here's pre-designed plans, if you just pick one, whether that's a duplex or a single family, because we've already done the review, you can speed up that process. So it'd really just be kind of on the experts as to what a timeline could be, and then we would just put that into a contract.
I guess for the money that you're asking for, though, do you think you'll spend it through 2026 or sooner or later than that?
Sooner than that. Hopefully we have all of the infrastructure built before 2026, as in the road, utilities, et cetera.
Commissioner Friesen.
Enrico, do you have any problem if we qualified our commitment on the 250,000? So the first part there, the 35,000, I think would be just you want to do that now. The 250,000, can you do that in conjunction with the private partner that you select, or do you want to do all this before you select a private partner?
Ideally all before, but if that's the will of the commissioners to wait, I mean, it's entirely up to you, but ideally before, just so we can kind of move quickly. So
I kind of had that same feeling, whether we get some commitment before we decide to spend the money. I know you've had a couple of site developers, but I'd like to hear whether you're locking on to anybody, and then at that time, we could probably take it back up pretty easily.
Well,
Is that what you're
I'd
kinda
be
thinking?
prepared to make a motion if it's time.
Well,
So I would motion to approve the request by the city of Hutchinson based on the policy we just approved as requested, with a recommendation that city staff confer with city council about having, well, I think since cities, the question is county or city, I think the city staff, Enrico and his staff, should confer with his council on our recommendation that the private partner be engaged in the design process. For clarification, I'm making that as a recommendation. If you and the council decide that's not appropriate, I'm okay, since you're taking the lead here, not to hinge our funding on that. So,
and if I, just to make sure that I understand properly what you're saying, so when we put the RFP out, for example, the development would need 2 points of access, for the road, just for fire safety. That could come off of Hendricks. There's a little stub, Hayes Street, and then where the 2 New Beginnings lots are, it was platted, they're separate, but it was platted to have road access off of Hendricks as well. So the design of what it could look like and where the homes would be and how they would be stacked would be entirely up to private enterprise. Is that what you're referring to? Because we wouldn't be going into it saying, here's where we want a home. We'd be leaving it up to them.
the 250, when you start talking about engineering, utilities, I think whoever's your partner, if they're putting money in, if they're taking risk with development, my recommendation is you get buy-in from the partner before you finish engineering, surveying, utilities, because the private industry side is going to have some opinion, and if you design things in a way that restricts their ability to make the best investment, I think you could limit the opportunity. But that's just a recommendation. I'm not conditioning the funding on that.
So more on a reimbursable is that what it sounds like?
I mean, it's possible that I'm not understanding exactly what the 250,000 is for.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like the longest motion in history. But I can restate it, but I just, maybe to say it in a more simple way, the sooner you can get your partner engaged and picked, I think the better outcome you're going to have, especially when you're spending taxpayer money and making permanent decisions. So restating the motion, it's to approve the grant request as made by the city of Hutchinson based on our new policy, with a recommendation that the city engage, determine and engage a private developer as soon as possible.
Motion by Commissioner Friesen. Do I have a second to that? Or?
Well, I'll second it, but I have a comment to make, and I think you bring out a very good point, and I'm not sure it had to be just a recommendation, Commissioner Friesen, in that I don't think any of us, city included, want to spend a lot of money on infrastructure until you know exactly how the houses are going to be placed on that property.
So staff over here kind of talking, I mean, I think these are good, I'm very much in line with some of the talking here, because the 35,000 is very straightforward on how to spend it, but there are a lot of details that I think we could easily sit down and figure that out on terms of development agreement on the nuts and bolts of this. So perhaps if I interpret this motion the way it is, you're talking about encumbering the 285, and the county is kind of in your motion committing to do it, but then just the city and county might need to talk some more about how the mechanics of that are going to actually work.
Yeah, the reason I'm making a recommendation is because they have an elected body. I am quite certain the mayor is going to watch this part of our meeting, and I'd be really surprised if they don't have a conversation based on our feedback at their next meeting. So, putting these restrictions and then volleying the requirements back and forth between two governing bodies could overcomplicate things. And so, if this was just our staff doing this, I think I would be more explicit in the requirement. But there's some trust here. Like, here's our feedback.
Would it be
you
easier?
guys are.
I appreciate it, and I highlighted recommendation when I was making notes on your motion, because I think I do understand the spirit. I guess I've got goodwill. I guess if your motion passes, we're gonna talk to each other about just how to do this the best way so it works.
They would encumber the amount,
But-
and then the spending is up to the city.
Yeah, the amount would be encumbered, and then the details of how it gets spent and refunded and reimbursed, we might come back later with some more details on that.
Yep.
Reports on that, yeah. So.
Is recommendation strong enough on this, or should we amend the motion to include that as a requirement? I want to ask council that.
Because it's the city of Hutch, and because I feel good about the dialogue we have, I think Randy and I are comfortable with that here. If it was a different partner, we might want things ironed down a lot firmer. But I think we're all on the same page at the moment, and I think we can get this accomplished.
There is one thing I want to, and it's not really part of this motion, but on the same hand it is, because we're going in a partnership with the Hutchinson, okay? I represent 9 small rural cities and a little bit of Hutch on top of that. If we do this and another community like Haven, which they've already got that in process, comes up and asks us, even though it's in Commissioner Bogner's district, and if we base this on, say, 33 houses, or maybe we use a smaller amount, maybe we use 25 or 30 houses, maybe we go in between the 24 and 33. Whatever that is per house, I think that needs to be under consideration to do in the other communities based upon that, rather than just an estimate on cost. I think if we can, once we designate this, I think we need to look at that and say, okay, the other mayors that are watching, this is a program that you can use because we're gonna have this amount of money. Does that make sense? so that it's uniform throughout the county?
Commissioners, if I may, just as additional show of goodwill and good faith in this process, that as Randy said, that this is for the entire county to benefit and participate from. And if they want to see how we're doing this, the RFP process that we structured and put together and any agreements used, that would be an open book. Here's exactly how we did it if you want to copy it or make it your own and kind of right size it. But it's to everyone's benefit, whether they're going to build in Yoder or wherever. Just here you go, and that can help you along the way. I genuinely believe that we all need each other. So
I'm just putting it in dollar shape. That's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
I'm doing, is putting it in dollars.
Did you pushed your button, didn't you?
Yeah, I really hope this works. I really do. I've got serious doubt. You know, Reagan famously said the most 9 dangerous words in the world are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And so, which is why I always shy away from things where the government is taking the lead on it, because time after time after time, it ends up not being developed, or it ends up sitting vacant, and sometimes they'll even use eminent domain to take it. Like, there's just story after story of things like that. So I really, really hope you succeed in this.
I got another question for you, but I'm not going to muddy up this motion, so it was just something else I wanted to ask you. So we got a motion, and did we get a second, right? Ron seconded it, okay. Further comments? If not, let's have a roll call.
Commissioner Hurst,
Yes?
Commissioner Friesen,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Weitzel,
No.
Commissioner Bogner.
I'm going to say no.
Okay,
I was going to say no, but I said yes, in the confidence you will make a return on this. I know where your office is. I'm just kidding. No.
You know where to find me.
The second question I had, I said in a meeting at the city a couple of years ago, and Greg probably is listening to this, and I believe he was there at the time, and there was some comments made, and I know some of these small communities do have some land. Ron and I've talked about that before. Even South Hutch has quite a bit of ground that they would like to develop. This is just an idea, but I had heard that they were getting more land acquisition just given to them. That happens. People don't want it. They sign it over to the city, whatever. They didn't want any more green space. If we got enough to take care of, we can't take care of it now. We got all these empty lots. Is that a possibility to take that ground and put it into motion doing this same thing? Some of those spots you don't want to take care of anymore. They were talking about more park space, and they said, we want no more parks, yet we're developing parks. And I'm not to chide the other governing body, but that was the very conversation that went on. And I know there was an election since then, but I know that there's lots that the city owns, and is that something, if they're in some key areas, that you could do some one-off, two-off houses type to build housing with that? There's already infrastructure right there.
It's worth exploring. And so
I'd like to hear that you do that if you really don't need that ground and you could give that up, because there was quite a tussle that they talked about, I remember back then, about not wanting any more park ground because there was some ground been given to them. So we don't have adequate to mow and take care of it half the time now, because it's hard to do with the staff we have. And if that's truly the case, is that some ground that could be used for this?
Right.
I'm going to pose that question, and you can research it if you want. And some of it's in some decent areas. So,
I appreciate the question.
no, thank you. Appreciate it. All right.
Thanks, appreciate it. Nothing's easy, but appreciate your work and taking some risk, especially being new to the job and stepping out there. That's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Enrique. Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to the next one, 7B. Agreement between Hutch Regional Medical Center and for the Arlington EMS station.
So Commissioners, I'll bring this up, and the EMS Director, Dave Johnston, is here in case you have questions about the building. But a couple years ago, Reno County, with the ARPA funds, allocated $260,000 to help with build a new ambulance barn, EMS station in Arlington. The current station is not big enough, I think, even for ambulances. It's not tall enough. They need a new station. That, at the time, the county commission was on board, and so that's where the allocation of $260,000. So about a year ago, probably, the county was talking with the hospital EMS about who was going to take the lead on the building. And with it being ARPA funds, we handed it to the hospital to take the lead with their process for building. And so we've had different agreements come up, ARPA agreement, a new agreement for the for the EMS service. This agreement is kind of puts it in place to the hospital would take the lead. Now, based on our contract with the hospital, any satellite stations, anything not that's EMS related, that's not at the hospital, is the responsibility of Reno County to pay for and maintain, and utilities that we pay for. So the hospital, and Dave may be able to give more explanation, but has got bids, got quotes on buildings. I don't know what the total cost is, but Reno County would be responsible for paying for the full amount. The $260,000 is out of ARPA. The remaining amount, say it's a $700,000 or $800,000 building, remaining amount would come out of our capital project reserve fund. That and so we have adequate funds. The agreement that is on here kind of shows that we'll pay within 90 days of final construction, but it also all design and construction contracts, including change orders, shall be approved by myself. Of course, I will, before doing that, let the commission know none of this would be behind your guys' back with those, unless it's small change orders. I'll just kind of probably in a report, but if there's anything big or the total construction cost, I would want you guys would want to say, and I know if they come back with $1 million, the commission may say, well, wait a minute, what else can we do? So, but this agreement is to get this rolling so that hopefully we can get this built by sometime in 2025. Obviously, we want to start as soon as possible, but I don't know the timeline. And Dave, do you have anything to add?
No, you hit most of the key points. I think the thing with this agreement is the previous documents come before the county agreement outlining, the title and where it will land with the county, the ARPA fund agreement already to allocate the fund. This piece will lay out the ability for us to actually go out and get some architectural and engineering designs. And so then we will come back with a more detailed proposal cost of this. I'll tell you estimates that I've gotten back. We've had 3 different builders come back to us on it with just estimates, and we're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of $225 to $275 square foot, and we're looking at about 2,900 square feet. So that's ranging from $650 to upwards of $800,000 on that. And we want to do our due diligence to make sure we go through and we don't want to add fat to it, but we want it to be an appropriate building that's going to, last several years. We've been looking primarily at pre-engineered metal buildings for it out there. And this next agreement here will help us move forward, and then we'll come back with what the costs are expected to be.
John, you pushed your button a minute ago.
Yeah, so that was my question. I guess they've addressed it. So this would be for the rest of the commissioners: is should there be an upper limit on this? Should we specify a ceiling?
Have you been to Yoder? Have you been to Pretty Prairie?
I haven't been down to it yet. I've heard that it's a nice station down there, and I believe their architect, one of their firms, is the one that we're receiving a quote from.
Okay. And theirs is not a steel building.
Post frame.
Post frame.
No, it's built on a foundation.
Okay.
And so, and they have 2 bays down there. You're only going to have 1 bay, aren't you?
The 2,900 square feet was for 2 bays.
Okay, now, I was told by their engineer that if you stay under a certain square footage, you don't have to put in sprinkler system.
I think that might be a possibility. And I think as we're finding with the building for the new station downtown here, that there's some other ways around that sprinkler system. That's why double layers of drywall, other things to try and mitigate that need for the sprinkler system.
You bet.
Yeah.
And, but I would suggest that you talk with the contractor that built Pretty Prairie. Theirs cost $575,000, and it has 2 bays. It doesn't have quite all the living space that you need in it, but it's got potential for a kitchen and so forth. And if you're going with a metal building, I'm not sure that that's most economical.
Okay.
Just as a consideration, because we were down there, Randy was down there. It's a pretty nice facility down there.
All right.
And so maybe a trip down would take a look at it, get a hold of Travis or whoever, and take a look at it and see if something like that might fit.
Okay.
I'm looking at money, okay?
No, I
You know me,
understand.
we've talked about that already, and Commissioner Vogler was with me when we did. So if we can, if we can build a slab house for 150 to 165 or so dollars a square foot, maybe we need to take a good gander at something, okay?
All right, can do.
I'll tell you what to do, but I'm just suggesting that
Well, the funds come from here, so we actually technically
Yeah.
can tell you what to do.
we gotta pay for it and we own it, so
Commissioner
we need
Buckner,
to have
you
a,
pushed your button.
Yeah.
we need to have a little bit of say.
Yeah.
But piggyback on Ron, and it was a meeting we all were at. The addition or the subtraction of a fire suppression system adds tremendously to the cost.
Yeah.
Could be as high as $70,000. So if you can mitigate that cost, like it was discussed there, but for the purpose of the open meeting here, it's like Ron says, and I know you're doing it, Dave. You're checking into it. And before we do a final deal, like you say, when you come with the numbers, that'll make a lot of difference on how we feel about the project.
I think,
And I know you're working on it from the previous meeting, you've said it, but the general public needs to know that we are looking at all the options, and you are looking at all the options.
we will.
Thank you.
Sir.
Yeah, I think you're doing a good job. I'm conscious of money.
No, I want to be a good steward of the taxpayers' funds, so we'll do
Appreciate
due diligence in this.
Any further, John?
So do we want to put a ceiling on this, or?
You know,
No?
I think we should. You can come back if it just absolutely can't come in with that.
All right.
I think so. What would be
I'm personally not ready to put a ceiling on it because I don't know what prices are gonna change and how it's designed, so I have a little problem putting
He's
a
got
lot
it.
of money on it.
I think you can bring it in under that, honestly, the 800, easy enough.
Yeah.
If we can change some things, I'm comfortable with that.
But if he is exploring all options, those numbers will be there from those people that are less to cap it so he doesn't get an opportunity to discuss things fully with whoever he's working on. I would say, from a consensus, what our goal is to keep it a usable, good building, and personally, I don't see a reason to cap it. When you come with the
Well, we've gotta
numbers,
change orders
it'll
in
either
here.
float or it won't.
I do believe in this process, we'll have plenty of opportunities to provide feedback where we are and the numbers we're getting back and solicit the feedback before we come back even to the full board.
Right, and you
so we
pointed
get
out,
those-
we gotta prove that before we go forward anyway, so.
Okay.
So I've got one question. So, what exactly are we approving here then? Is this the approval to get bids, or because it seems to me we should wait to approve something like this until we get some bids back.
This is to approve, this is an agreement to move forward. So as you look, or as you can see on number 2, project costs, total cost of the project shall be approved by Reno County, that would be the commission, and based on plans approved by Reno County prior to construction. This is so the hospital can move forward. It's kind of like we've signed other agreements, but this allows them to start spending money knowing they're going to get the money back. All their other project costs they'll get back from the county in some manner. So, and I can't speak for the hospital, but my understanding is they're not going to move forward till they know that the county has
Committed
to saying, yes, we are paying for this.
Okay, well then, I will motion to approve this, but add a ceiling of 575,000, which can be negotiated, depending on how the bids come in.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion?
I think it's always good, regardless of the partnership and trust, to set expectations. And so, it kind of reverses what you're saying. So it's like, you can like administratively now, I think you guys have the ball, but if you're going to go over, and then you got to come back and just let us know. So versus like it kind of has, this agreement speaks on both sides, because it's like we're gonna fund this blank check, and then it says we're gonna have approval authority, but it says Reno County. Is that you? Is that us? So
Yeah, I would, my understanding of the agreement is the total project cost, that's the county commission. What I would have approval of, that's in the agreement, is change orders and other discussions that won't wait on a commission meeting every 2 weeks for small, if it's a $5,000 change order, something that comes up. But the actual total project cost is county commission.
it's always good though, like set a budget, because then people are working towards that versus, I think it's easier to come back to us with a $700,000 project when we don't specify what we think it should be. So
Does that include land cost? Or is that just the building cost? That 575 you're talking about?
what's the agreement for?
It's the entire, if I remember right, it's
15 or something on
I think
It's-
it does mention land acquisition costs. It's
It's-
very, is it
Yeah.
15,000? So
15,000 for.
I would
I
say
guess
it'd be included. Was that your motion? To be all inclusive?
Yes. And I'm not set on that number. I just came up with that number because that's what Ron said the one in Pretty Prairie costs. And, we could maybe downsize it a little bit. But, if somebody wants to amend the number, that's fine too.
We've also got inflation, John.
Oh, I understand. I was throwing a number out there, and, if somebody wants to amend the number, that's fine.
I think I will. Because with what I saw at Pretty Prairie and in concerning with some additions for living space and kitchen and some things they need, let's put that at 610,000.
Okay, I'll second
To
that.
amend it to 610.
I'll second that.
I just want to clarify, even if it comes in at 605, you guys are still going to review the project and approve it. So just so we're all clear.
If it comes in at 675, we'll review it too, right?
Yeah, no matter what the amount is, you guys are going to see it again, but I appreciate the transparency and conversation.
Got a motion and a second.
So this is, just to clarify, this is a motion to amend my motion that we're voting on. We're not voting on the actual motion. We're voting to raise the ceiling to 610.
610, okay. Any further comment on that? Not roll call on that amendment.
Commissioner Hurst?
Yes.
Mr. Friesen?
Yes.
Commissioner Parks?
Yes.
Commissioner Weitzel?
Yes.
Commissioner Bogner?
Yes.
All right, that passes. Now, the original motion, as amended. You want to state it again?
To approve it, but to approve as presented by staff with the exception of adding a ceiling of 610,000.
And that was seconded by Commissioner. All right. Further comment? Seeing none, roll call.
Commissioner Hurst,
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes?
Commissioner Weitzel,
Yes.
Commissioner Bogner.
Yes.
All right, moving right along.
Thank
6B.
you.
6B, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. 6B, we moved down to 6D, which was replacement appointment of the Reno County Health Board. Huh? Oh, I got 7C, sorry. I did skip that. Okay. Addendum to the agreement with iParamedics.
And
Mr.
I
Cordington.
All right, this is just an addendum to a current agreement. I put this on business items because 3 of the commissioners weren't on the commission when this was originally approved. But at that time, when the ARPA funds came out and we were saying we needed administrative costs, the city of Hutchinson also uses iParametrics. We have some joint kind of funds. We didn't know how much it was going to cost for them to administer and kind of verify all the reimbursements and help make sure that we fit the audit guidelines and kind of helped us follow the federal requirements. We are now at the maximum amount. We're probably going to spend that within the next couple weeks or month. And the original contract also ended in October of 2024. So this addendum is to extend that to hope last throughout the rest of ARPA funds and audits, which will be, I believe, through, well, we can spend the funds through 2026. So it'd be early 2027 when we probably stop using iParametrics. So the request is to allow this to cover the additional funds. Let me see where the, approve the presented agreement for us to use ARPA interest. So the money to pay for this is out of interest we've earned from the ARPA funds sitting in an interest-bearing account. That interest does not have to be used on ARPA specific items, but it's in a special fund that's related to ARPA right now. So this will not change any other allocations of the ARPA funds, but we'll use some of that extra money that we've earned by holding on to the $12 million for the past couple of years. Any questions?
Nope. Commissioner Winston?
Yeah, so have we gotten other bids? Do we know how they compare with other in the industry for?
When we first signed the agreement, we put it out to bid, and they were much cheaper than the other ones that we got at the time. So,
And changing to someone else would be fiscally impossible, like that would not be
Yeah.
cheaper at this point.
Comments? Do you have a motion?
I would make a motion to approve this this agenda topic as presented by staff.
I'll second that. Further comments? Not, roll call.
Commissioner Hurst,
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Weitzel,
Yes.
Commissioner Bogner.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Okay, now 6B's moved down to 7D. Talking about the replacement appointment for Reno County Health Department Advisory Board. Commissioner Weitzel, you wanted that moved down.
Yeah, so it was just so I didn't have to vote no on the consent agenda because, I mean, you guys know what I'm going to say. I think we ought to interview these people because they do deal directly with the public. It's not like, a department head hiring somebody. These are boards that we appoint.
Okay, appreciate that. Anyone else? Moving it forward, we need a motion.
Move to approve the replacement appointment to the Reno County Health Department Advisory Board.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Friesen. Further comments? Roll call.
Commissioner Hurst,
Yes.
Commissioner Friesen,
Yes.
Commissioner Parks,
Yes.
Commissioner Weitzel,
No.
Commissioner Bogner.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1. Moving to 7E. we created one, Adam, for you, but this was a topic that Commissioner Weitzel wanted to visit about, so I'll let him
Yeah,
present
so,
his questions.
so this document was, I think, about 790 pages. And it's got a lot of things relating to climate change and allocating resources to people based on race, gender, gender identity, things like that. And so I wanted to know if there was an appetite with the commission to try and remove some of that language, or if I should just quit reading and vote no. I mean, honestly, you know, it's a long document, and, you know, I've made very detailed notes so far, but if there's not an appetite, then, you know, I'll just vote no and go on. But if there is an appetite, then I'll bring what I found to the rest of the commission.
Would you like to speak to what this document is and what it's about and why?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So Commissioners, Adam Weiss, our Emergency Management Director for the county here. What was in front of you, or what was presented to you, was approximately 790 pages. It's the mitigation plan for not only our county, but 10 other counties, so 11 counties total. That plan's required to be updated every 5 years. It was last updated in 2019, so it was updated again. It's due this year. We have to have it adopted before January if we choose to get into it. The plan that has been presented to you, unfortunately, can't be changed. It's approved at a state level and federal level, and the 10 other counties are in the process of adopting it as well. If the commission chooses to adopt it, then everyone else in our community who participated in our meetings, there's 29 different organizations that have participated, can choose to adopt that plan as well. So what it's really designed to do is to foster communication and cooperation, not only between us, but between us and the public and the state and federal government. Identify potential hazards that are in our community and potential mitigation strategies that we can use. And the biggest thing that it does for our community, in my eyes, is it opens us up to grant dollars. So it opens us up to the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, the Hazard Mitigation Post-Fire Grant Program, the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, and then Flood Mitigation Assistance. The Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities, I know some of our school districts have targeted those grants in recent years for storm shelters. I know they can be targeted for some of the other things that our smaller communities may need, such as outdoor warning devices, or my office has tried to target some of those post-fire grant dollars in the past as well. So it's a good thing to adopt, but unfortunately we can't change it.
So there's an option to adopt or not adopt?
If the commission chooses not to adopt it, that means we won't qualify for any of those grants for the next 5 years. If you choose to adopt it, we do.
Can we adopt our own?
We cannot adopt our own.
Who wrote it?
So this was in conjunction of all 11 counties, all stakeholders in our community. So we had 29 different jurisdictions that participated from Reno County. We sent out letters and called every school district, every small city, all the townships. There's a plethora of people that we called, and 29 chose to participate with us. So it got written with that, and then there's a whole list of resources that was used in compiling the data, and then the contractor who actually put it together, I believe, was Blue Umbrella, and it was written at more of a state level.
So I'm hearing it's developed by the 29 entities that wrote this document to file it with the state. Is that what I'm hearing? Or
So the information was provided by our 29 entities, and then the state's the one who actually compiles the data.
So why couldn't Reno County do our own and then send it to the state for approval?
We could if we had staff power to do it, but I
Because
think
I
it would
mean,
be
there's very specific things. Like most of the documents, actually very good. I actually learned a lot going through it, but there's just some very specific things that I very strongly object to. And so I mean, like, would it be possible for us to remove those things? I didn't even know if there's an appetite for the rest of the commission to do it, but would it be possible to remove those things that deal with politically charged language and then submit our own to the state?
I think it would be a huge undertaking on staff to write our own plan, and then the state approval and federal approval would also take months as well.
But
so we'd
it'd
be
be a
starting back from
possibility.
square one after
You know,
we spent 6 months on this.
Just being involved in some federal grant making as of late, they tell you what to put in there and you don't have a lot of choice. I would guess that there's a template from the federal level that, you know, we could send you to as part of the committee on the next one, and you could go up there and advocate, and it would get sent up there and it would get kicked back until you put what they want in it. I think that's the reality of these policies. If you want to take federal grant making, you're going to have to take the politically charged policy that comes with it. But I mean, how often do you guys do this?
Once every 5 years.
Yeah, so you know, maybe you could offer some opinion in 5 years on the next one.
Fair enough. That's why I wanted to talk about it. I appreciate everybody's input.
That having all been discussed and said, we probably need to make a motion here. We pulled that out of there, didn't we? Or no? That
This
was
wasn't
added.
even,
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
this wasn't even on your consent agenda. We
Yep,
plan to
you're right,
bring
it
it to you
wasn't.
towards the end of the month. So if there's any, we can either adopt it now, or if there's any questions that you may have, specific questions on the plan between now and then, I'd be more than happy to answer those. But like I said, it is a lengthy plan. If you have those, please send them to me so I can at least look into them.
All right. Appreciate it, Adam. Thank you.
Commissioner.
County Administrator's report.
In the packet is the monthly reports for aging, public transportation, appraiser, automotive, clerk, community corrections, district attorney, emergency management. I'll ask, like I usually do you have any questions, anything in those reports? Okay. And then the financial reports through July 31st are also in the packet. Nothing really different than last month. I will note, if you noticed, the county clerk, just so in case you looked at this, it looks like their personnel services has spent a lot. We did some transitions because if you then go to, if I go to elections, which is a different division in the general fund, you'll see that it's less. So it was kind of a shift. So the actual county clerk department is in fine shape, just like every other department. But on this report, it looks like the county clerk portion has overspent on personnel, but it was just a shift in how we pay people in the department.
I think in her report she addressed that, didn't she?
Yeah, I read that.
Just kind of wanted to bring that out because that was one of the things I noticed when I was like, okay, wait a minute, I want to be ready to answer that question.
Yeah, so I thought the same thing, and then I read her report, and so
Okay.
I deleted that from my email.
Okay. So I don't have anything else on the financials. If you don't have any questions, the general fund is in really good condition right now, shape. The agency funds like tech, mental health, you know, their balance goes down because we don't really budget or allocate about what we were going to spend. Or, you know, the taxes come in, we don't create any cash balance to protect in those funds. The general fund's the main one that we build up reserves to protect, because the general fund, if any other fund or any other emergency comes up, that's the fund we can use to pay for anything in the county. So if you don't have any questions on that, the other things I was going to mention are just a reminder that the county's courthouse has an open house on Wednesday, August 28th from 8:30 to 4:30. That is the same date, or same time date as a county commission meeting. You guys meet from 9 to whenever you're finished, which comes into my next comment. As a reminder, the 2025 budget public hearing, revenue neutral rate hearing is at the next meeting. So August 28th. So you'll deal with the budget, and then also the open house will be throughout the day. So if any commissioners can be here after the commission meeting, if you want to talk with any public that comes for the open house or a tour, feel free to be here. Those were my comments for today.
Okay, thank you. Well, commissioner comments, I'm going to start today. I don't ever do that. I always pass it around, but I just felt like I wanted to start today. I had some recent concerns emailed to me. I know Randy got it too, on the tag department. I know that's an ongoing saga over there with the with several issues, one of them being a timely fashion to get people served. And we reiterated to some folks this week that it is part of the space and needs plan. Eventually down the road, when the register of deeds shrinks back a little bit, we'll try to expand. And so I know we're looking at more personnel over there in the future to help cut that need down. And it's probably pretty cyclical. It's up and down depending upon, especially the end of the month when people wait to get their tag in. A lot of times it makes it bad. But I want to encourage people to use that QLIS. If they don't, it makes it a whole lot easier before you get there. I know I usually put that in. Even when I get there, there's a crowd. I can't even make it from south of town there before they're telling me I'm already in line. Then I got to go to window number 1. They usually work you back in. So if that happens to someone, they will work you in. And so you don't have to re-enter and do that. They don't want to skip over anybody if they can keep from it. So also, working on a project, and I want to bring it to the board here before long in light of economic development. I don't want to say a whole lot, but I know you've been working on some stuff that I talked about with tax repossessions, that kind of a thing. I think there's some possibilities in that for the county. I don't know if that's something we're prepared to talk about at all, but
I'm always kind of prepared to talk about the tax sale because that's a lot of my professional life. I'm not sure. A lot of the properties that we sell at the tax sale some of them have some value that's being underutilized for a lot of reasons, and some of them are just properties that kind of struggle. They possibly weren't platted very well or aren't in a good spot. So it's Rita Parrington and I have talked about working with making sure that I know the land banks, the local land banks usually take an interest in the tax sale and sometimes buy properties. I know some of the other non-for-profit developers do too, and we can, owning it. The problem with the county owning them, it's always been discussed: should the county just purchase it themselves? Once, as a government entity, if we own the land, we'd have to clean it up and sell it again. It'd be kind of like the discussion earlier today, but maybe in terms of we'd have to publish bids, we'd have to go through a whole transparent process, and we might not come out ahead on that.
yeah. It'd be interesting. I guess I'm going to anger a lot of people with this. My feelings are that I hate to see that continue to go to, it seems to be profitable for people to buy a lot of that and put it in rentals. And the more rentals a community has, the more distressed it becomes, whether we like it or not, because they price people out of housing and nobody has a stake in the game, basically, if they're not here and they're not owning, if they can. And we talk about economic development at a greater price, and there is need for lower price housing. And so I think that needs to get on the market somehow where people can buy it instead of going into refurbishing with nonprofits and rental agencies.
One of my takes on the tax sale is, unfortunately, when people are to the point where they're not paying the property taxes, they're not doing any of the maintenance items.
Well, that's true.
So I always think it's a good thing, generally speaking, for even if it's a landlord to buy it and at least put enough effort into it to keep the yard maintained, keep it structurally sound so they don't get it shut down as a unfit to live property. But that's just, a lot of the properties that go to tax sale are so distressed, they need some investment by whoever buys them just to be livable.
Yeah, I agree, but and one more thing before I pass it on. I'm going to go to Ron next, so I'm going to go down that way. But talking about budget, Randy and I've talked this week. I'm just going to present some things and throw it out here to the rest of the board. I had Randy run some figures for me to take 10% off outside agencies to see what we could come up with. We're about a $900 and some $1,000 difference between a revenue neutral rate, if I remember correctly, and 10% off, except for conservation and I believe the extension have matches from the state. It might hurt them if we did that, if we left them out of there. And then in that figure, I also removed from that, so he'll share my figures here in a minute. I also removed from that the $5,000 for the farmer's market. I'd rather buy my sound system than to listen to somebody, play music. Quite honestly, maybe they could use that space for something else if they could get more people there. And then, in the time that we're in, we've got to be very careful about spending money. And I think, personally speaking, I shouldn't probably say this publicly, had a raise in quite some time. And the private sector is not doing that. And since I've been here and prior to, year over year, they've had a percentage of raise for a coma. And I know expenses have went up from everybody, but we had a penciled in there a 5% COMA, and I'd like to see that reduced. And him and I battered back and forth in the office a little bit, but we come to a 4%. I'd like to be closer to the 3.5%. That takes it down pretty significantly. And then in that also, I had him remove the figures for the raises for the commissioners. And I just wanted us to look and see what that looks like today. Ron had shared with me earlier at another meeting that he'd been looking at some figures to take out of that. But if you wouldn't mind breaking that down just a little bit to see what that looks like. And I'd like to look at it at both those percentages. I know you don't want to, but I'm going to push on that.
Okay, so some numbers that were ran after Commissioner Parks' cuts. So just to start with, the flat mill levy is 35.762. The revenue neutral rate would be 34.461. So it's 1.3 mils, which is $955,262. And so the cuts that Commissioner Parks wanted, and I'll kind of repeat a little bit of what he said, but to remove the 5% pay for performance and COLA would move or leave the COLA at 2% for county employees, and the pay for performance would be from 3% to 2%. So it's total of 4% possible or salary pool. That's a reduction of $203,000. It's $202,908, and then the commission wages is a $46,000 reduction, and then you also had mentioned removing one of the position discretionary positions.
I forgot about that.
That's a $60,000 reduction. So just in wages, that's $308,908. So just under $309,000. The partner agencies, as you mentioned, you removed $4,000 from farmers market. 10% cut to tech was $40,000. Horizons 10% cut was $40,000. County fair was a $2,000 reduction, and then the museum was an $18,500 reduction. So it's $104,500. So the total amount of cuts, if for county employees you left it at 4% salary pool, is $413,408 in cuts. So not quite half of the difference between the flat mill levy and the R&R.
What's the difference between, because we talked about taking just a flat COLA and taking the incentive raises out of there. What's the difference between that and just doing the 3.5%? I know you don't want to say it, but
I don't have that in front of me, but
it was a little bit more.
It
Generated a little bit more. It's closer to the 500,000 mark.
Well, I guess I do it. Yeah. That amount, with everything else being the same except a 3.5% salary pool, would be $460,828 in cuts. So that cut would be, it's
I mean, I just know people are on the outside
more.
are suffering and they're not getting any extra wage, a lot of them, and then we turn around and you know, not that I'm for people not making more money, but it's just hard for me to swallow. I'm just sharing that with the board that we continue to do that one. You know, there's a lot of good, hardworking people out there that don't get that, and so you know, time may tell here after November if things clear up. We don't know, but maybe things get better, maybe they won't. But you have well, yeah, you got a comment on that? I was going to move to Commissioner Hurst. If you got a quick comment. I'm just throwing this out there for fodder anyway.
Shucks, my comment was on one of the first things you said, and I forgot. It was before getting into the salary stuff. What did you talk about before that?
Tag department, and then tax repos.
Oh, yeah. So I was going to say that the tax thing, I think, would be I mean, I think that would be a great use of economic development funds. You know, kind of keeping them, you know, bidding on getting them up to code and up to where they needed to be, and then selling them to private individuals. I mean, I would 100% be in favor of that.
Yeah, that's what the ARPA funds were used for, available to, and some of them haven't used them, okay?
Okay. I feel like we kind of opened a topic, which is fine.
I just want to throw it out for
I
people to
was just
discuss.
wondering if we
He
should.
couldn't get a lot of participation
Yeah.
from people.
No,
wanting
that's
to
fine.
share
I was wondering if we could kind of have a conversation around that before we go to the next commission.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
So first question is, I think budgets are due soon. So if we're introducing new changes to the budget, we can do that next meeting?
You can do that at the next meeting because you'd have to vote on everything
Yeah.
to get consensus. At the next meeting, though, you'll have the public hearings, but if you're going to reduce before you approve a budget, staff's gonna need time to run the numbers on the state budget form to make sure everything so we check everything. So I would recommend if you're gonna make cuts and approve the budget in the same day, we're gonna have to do them a couple hours apart. One would have to be at the very beginning of the meeting, and then maybe come back at the end of the meeting, staff may have it, or the first meeting in September to actually adopt the budget if there's changes. But if you guys want to have a special budget session, we can have that. I hadn't really heard anything about what cuts you guys were wanting to make.
Well,
But if you guys bring something to me, I can
one
send
thing
it
that's
out.
worked well before, I don't know that we've ever done it as a group of 5, but we used to do it as 3. You'd send a spreadsheet and it'd be like, Commissioner Parks recommended these changes, and then it's like every commissioner just provides some comment to you, and then you can kind of figure out where our heads are at so you can be prepared.
Well, that's why I want to get a dialogue
Yeah.
going, so we can get that done for
I can send, kind of what his cuts are, and you guys have some budget summaries if there's anything else that you guys want to.
Yeah, well, I'd like to just see them, all the little ticky-tacky items on a sheet or something so we can be prepared and don't have to.
Each department and each agency, what they recommend, what they're asking for.
Well,
There.
Or
yeah, if commissioners want changes, if we could see the full list of changes before the meeting, that would be really nice.
So that's what you want. So if all the commissioners can send me what changes to the budget you would like to see, I can put a document together and put
Yeah.
it out. And it'd probably be with the packet so that it is public at
Yeah.
some point, because I don't want to
Yeah,
go
that's-
behind the scenes.
That was my question, is would that violate coma?
No, we don't want to.
Well-
So I wouldn't send it back for
The suggestion
here's
is
what's there.
you send the full list, and then we send it back to you individually. We're not going to see what the other commissioners are saying.
Right, and I would not share that, and
Yeah,
then at the
until
meeting
the
we
meeting.
can look at it.
Yeah.
And then you could compile all that before our meeting.
The one other comment I have on the COLA, I think it's pretty important to do that, but I'm in spirit agreeing with hey, we need to cut more payroll. I think it would be better to continue to look at positions. We have over the last 4 years I've been here cut positions in many departments, and I've never heard a complaint from constituents, from staff, from anyone. So I'm not saying we should go chainsaw staff positions, but the idea of maybe not filling positions that are vacant, maybe looking at ancillary positions and just cutting the bigger costs, which is FTEs, and then having better employees, because you're gonna attract. Let me make sure that comment's clear. We have great employees, and we want to keep those employees, and we're going to keep them by paying them fair wages and COLA and so forth. But so I want to keep our better employees through that method, but I also want to reduce expense by reducing headcount, and I think that's the long term. We can be more efficient if we have our top employees. I don't know if you've ever heard of the idea that 80% of the work is done by 20% of the employees. So that's not always the case, but if you use it as some guide, I think we're gonna start to negatively impact our top performers if we don't pay COLA, and so I'm with you in spirit, Commissioner Parks. I just think we ought to cut it in a different area.
Well, I think you're moving to do some changes. There's some director turnover in the next year, maybe possibly have some savings in some areas too as well. And Like I said, we took one position out as well, so out of that three that
We've
was in
made
there,
some
just to show that.
great progress. Like, we have decided not to fill FTEs, and, you know, we got a little pushback, but there's been no negativity. So I think we continue that effort. I think it's paying dividends for the county.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Commissioner Hurst.
The only thing I've heard is the lack of qualified employees when it comes to having a CDL. Can't find those people that'll qualify for a CDL.
I agree with that.
And that's a big problem, is to keep them. And you don't notice it until there's snow on the ground, which unfortunately, we haven't had much. But when you get snow on the ground and you don't have a CDL driver out there to run a snowplow, you'll get some phone calls. But you might not, John, but out in the country you will.
Oh, I get phone calls. I just direct them to the city.
Okay, yeah. Two, on the same line, I'm not gonna go into detail about where I did cuts until it's time to get into it, but I've come up with about $310,000 to $330,000 cuts. I do, and I'm back again. I don't know if any other, but I got a couple more complaints about being denied to start a brush pile when it's drizzling out or the rain or the wind wasn't blowing. And so I followed up with Randy and he's followed up with Adam to look at this situation, and we've talked about it. And there'll probably be something coming up here Randy will bring to us one of these days with regard to 9/11 calls. So
I appreciate you bringing that up, because I had the same personal problem not being able to burn most of the summer. So I wanted that looked into too.
And so they are looking into that and having some conversations with 9/11. So that's on the way. The other thing I've got here primarily is those are the two things that have to do directly with the county. The other was I want to congratulate on State Kansas Department of Health and Environment for their child care inadequacy. I'll tell you what, a school called me. They put in an application for their child care program, and it was 70 to 80 days before they got anything back. And then the only reason they got anything back was that the superintendent called up the governor's office. And unfortunately, sometimes our county gets blamed for these things. And so when we look at it, he had to call the governor's office to get the fire marshal out to check the facilities. They have 2 modulars sitting behind the elementary school. They're 10 foot apart. They were told by state that they had to have 2 different addresses for that. So they did that. Then it comes around that oh, by the way, you're gonna have to put a fence between the playground because you have 2 different child care units now on addresses. So it didn't make sense because there's maybe what I used to call a jungle gym on one side and another type of playground equipment on the other. Well, maybe you could take this group and do a field day trip while the others get to play on both of them. So it's just the new regulations, just absolutely, state KDHE is just completely lack of common sense with regard to how to manipulate those regulations, and they got new regulations and they need to relook at them. I know you're dying to say something.
Well, I don't want to put words in Carla's mouth or anyone, but she and I had just had this conversation before the meeting and I've had this with multiple other people I work with about how disappointing KDHE has been lately, particularly with the rollout of their new revised child care center code, which has gone very badly. But it's not just here locally. It's unfortunately a lot of people are having trouble with KDHE right now, and it's hampering a lot of progress. That's all I wanted to add.
So if the representatives or senators out there that are listening, maybe you ought to work a little harder with some of the people up there in Topeka and inform them what's going on. One other thing that's just recently come out is the federal government has decided to look into eminent domain on 100 million acres in the U.S. And part of those 10 systems that they want to do it goes through Kansas. That's all.
I reviewed a document from the Kansas Policy Center that came out this week, and they were ranking counties by percentage of tax increase starting at 2017 and going through this last year. Reno County was, the last couple of years hasn't raised taxes, but for the whatever that is, 7 years average, we're up about 36%, one of the highest in the state. And so I thought that was interesting. I'm definitely supporting the idea of cutting some things, and I've got some ideas as well that I'll send you. Taxes are too high. I think I said this earlier in the meeting that for every $30,000 your property goes up, your tax bill goes up, at least where I live, $50 a month. And so obviously I live in Hutchinson, so we've got the city and the library and the rec department and the college and the schools, but yeah, taxes are too high in this area, which is, I think, one of the reasons why it's harder to attract people to come here. So I wanted to bring that up to light, and a lot of cool things going on in the community. Check Facebook or the Hutch website, or there's a lot of things coming up that are fun. Get out, meet some people, have some fun, get to know your neighbors, and the more neighbors you get to know, the stronger our community will become.
Thank you, Commissioner Weitzel. Commissioner Friesen.
The only thing I had was I think it would be good to ask staff to amend our commission rules to clarify consent agenda handling, because it seems like we have an issue every meeting on it, and I think there's some lack of clarity on how we handle it. So if we had rules in place, I think it would be better. So then everybody knows and you don't have to debate the process. So generally it seems pretty friendly, but if we could just get some clarity on how consent agendas are handled, whether they require unanimous consent, and how a member can object, so we all have the same rules. I think that would be helpful.
So my interpretation of what I've got out there is that one member can ask to remove something from consent agenda, but I'll turn it back to you as a commission. If you want to, you can adopt whatever rule you want on that. So if you want to say require something different, you can. It's really up to how you run your meeting.
I think history would say it's been applied different ways at different times. I think I remember, this is before you were here, an occasional debate on consent, and then a requirement to obtain agenda change. It was basically, I popped into Robert's rule, and one of the fundamentals that the rules are made to protect the minority, and so I think there is some credence to, like, if a consent agenda is designed to push through things that the minority doesn't want, that's not a very fair way to do it. So I'm just saying there has been some inconsistency in the past from this commission over my 4 years on how we apply it. I doubt you're going to get a lot of objection from rule clarity that either requires unanimous consent on the consent agenda or clarity that any member can ask for something to automatically be placed in the business items. But I think without clarity, there's enough unclarity that the majority could get what they want through either blocking an agenda item or so forth. So, I mean, maybe I'm, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, just asking the commission right now, is everybody okay with amending our rules to say that consent agenda requires unanimous approval, and if it doesn't, you have to pull the items out and automatically place them in the business items until you find unanimous approval.
Can I give a little clarity behind this? So I'm going through the process of becoming a parliamentarian, and so the idea behind the consent agenda is it's supposed to be things that are not controversial, that nobody would vote no on, and so they would, in general, require unanimous consent. And so typically, you would want to, if any one board member objects, move them to regular business so they can go through discussion, because what you don't want is for the chair to put a bunch of stuff on the consent agenda that might be controversial, or even one thing on the consent agenda that any member would object to, and then not having an easy way to get it off of there, and so then having no votes on the consent agenda, because the consent agenda should be a 5-0 vote. And so that's kind of the idea behind it, and why it's recommended that that consent agenda items be 5-0, and if they're not 5-0, then whatever is the holdup, then that be taken off, so that way it can be voted on with unanimous consent.
So for clarification, what are you proposing that we do?
Let me make a motion. I would instruct staff to provide us an amended meetings rule that clarifies how the commission would handle objections to items on the consent. Also clarify that consent requires unanimous approval and if it doesn't, the chair should remove items and place them on business until such time that consent is unanimous.
I've got a point of order. So to make a motion on an item not on the agenda, we would need to first add it to the agenda, which would take a 4-1 vote, which we can do.
How about I offer a
I think feedback would be a better way to.
Why don't you write something, come back to that effect, and we'll put it on.
Sorry.
I don't know that it's. I think the handier thing, Ron. Would it be handier just to get a preliminary agenda out each time without locking down to one where we can see if there's some item on there that's not going to get a 5-0 vote?
I think you should let the chair and staff do that. This was there were a few things that I walked into. No offense to Commissioner Hurst. This was a big push for me. We had a lot of ticky-tacky stuff in the business items. We used to talk about, salvage and buying every fire truck, and the commissioners would want to talk about all kinds of things. And we got a big change with utilizing consent agenda so we can lean on staff's knowledge. And so I think it really increases efficiency. We used to get a paper copy of every check. We'd get a ream this big every time. we've made a lot of improvements. So I think the consent agenda has a lot of value as an efficiency vehicle. So, and I think the chair and staff are well positioned to anticipate. Commissioner Weitzel's a little harder to anticipate. He has always got some.
Well, and I'll say too that where this goes to is, let's say you've got a board with 4 Democrats and 1 Republican on it. The idea of a consent agenda, if it takes more than 1 vote to pull it off, then the 4 Democrats could basically ram anything through they wanted with consent. And so that's kind of the idea, is there's no discussion with a consent agenda, and so if there's no discussion, then it should be a business item, not a.
Well, anyways, since my motion is out of order, I'm giving it to you, Mr. Chair, who could direct staff to get us something next meeting.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Let's make this a little simpler. We always, and I appreciate what we did, and you were responsible for that, putting a lot of things out of the business into the channel that were normal things. If someone wants to object to something that's on the agenda, just object to it at the meeting when it comes up. Automatically take it off, put it in, just kind of like we've been doing. But the problem is it should be something that, not philosophical, but it ought to be something that a person really has an interest in. It shouldn't just be a philosophical or a Democrat or a Republican deal. It should be something that we've studied and we really want to comment on and make an opinion on, and think it's worthwhile to put it into the business item. I just think that someone wants to do it, just do it.
I think we're saying the same thing. I don't like not knowing the rules on how to play the game.
Okay, we'll put it back on.
And I don't like arguing with Patrick. Well, I kind of do, actually.
Hey,
Yeah. But I don't like the fact that he feels like he has to defend himself, and so I think just putting it in black and white, especially, how many new commissioners are we going to have? At least 1, right? So, just building a better rule book for the next generation of commissioners, I think, is worthwhile.
But I think we've got the votes if you wanted a motion to add an item to the agenda.
I trust the chair will bring this up.
Yeah, because I think we're all saying the same thing.
Okay.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Clear on that, staff? Yeah.
The only thing I just want to add, staff do try and anticipate which things would be appropriate or not appropriate, and sometimes we just guess wrong. So.
Well, I was going to say that very thing on this topic today. There was just really a lot of research done behind the scenes on a particular appointment, and you had some fall away where, you have to fill that spot and nobody wants to apply, and the person's qualified. It's kind of a no-brainer to move that forward, so.
On the other hand, we do know Commissioner Weitzel's going to object to every one. So.
Only the ones we don't interview.
Mr. Bogner, would you like to get in here somewhere?
Well, yeah, it's been interesting. But on the comments, I did attend the Farm Bureau meeting that we got the invitation to last night. And some of those outside things are good to go to for the fact that the way they arranged it, they specifically said all elected officials would sit at different tables, spread it out so more people had a chance to make comments about what we're doing, and made sense. I mean, the organizers, it's their meeting, but it made sense. So by happenstance, I ended up at a table with quite a few people at it that had something, going back to Ron's deal, on the fire. And I've received a couple of different requests in the last couple of weeks, or some to say something about how we establish when they can burn, when they can use their burn permit, not. The last meeting we went to, we had a fire official with us, and there has been some problems, I've been told, with the way 911 dispatch, which is handled by another agency, has interpreted things, and our people have been talking to them. I think one of the biggest things is they take a wind reading once a day. You can have an early morning storm come through. The conditions are just like Ron's guy said. Perfect conditions. Wind still afterwards, everything's wet, light the fire. But the wind earlier, when the storm front come through, was high enough that it canceled it for the whole day. The thing you do gain by having a second reading, or at least a couple through the day, or a determination at the time they want to light the fire, is you gain those hours before the next wind front, is my opinion. But I have been referring them to Adam or fire staff, because Travis, because that's their wheelhouse, and they were brought on the policies that were implemented. But the thing that really hit home was Ron kind of insisted, and I thought it was a good idea. We all kind of consented that there should be a mechanism to turn these things in on paper. You've got certain elderly. You got guys like me that type so slow, I'll be here tonight trying to do, if I could get a piece of paper, I'd write it in and it's done. You got certain religious aspects there but they're turning in these paper copies. Some go right through. The next paper copy is denied. Now, we're not talking about they get their copy back, that they submit it with a note in it saying denied. I think there should not be any citizen that is trying to abide by the rules that we have established that gets a denial. Now, once he gets his permit, and she, legally you can use either gender, I've been told, to cover all. But anyway, when a person files for a permit and follows the legal procedure, he or she should get a permit. Now, whether they're denied use of it for specific wind conditions, burn ban, that can be established later, and they are subject to those rules. But to be denied a permit, and there were several people that compared it with their neighbors, permits are the same, everything filled out the same, one gets it, one gets denied. If that is going on, there needs to be some big changes, and they need to be made quickly. Because everybody, every citizen is entitled to the same rules. Thank you.
You're welcome. With that, no further comments, we'll adjourn. Appreciate your comments.